In the year 2847, humanity had spread across the stars like wildfire. Dozens of planets were colonized, and Earth's influence stretched far beyond its solar system. But peace was fleeting. A new threat loomed on the horizon, a species known as the Vorthak. These massive insectoid creatures moved in swarms, their hive-mind intelligence making them an unstoppable force. Entire colonies fell under their relentless attacks, leaving behind only barren wastelands where once thriving human settlements stood. On Earth, leaders gathered in a dimly lit council chamber deep beneath the United Nations headquarters. The air was thick with tension as holographic projections displayed images of destroyed worlds. Admiral Cal Vos, a tall man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, stood at the center of the room. His uniform bore medals earned over decades of service, but today his expression was grim. Humanity was losing this war, and everyone knew it. "We cannot keep fighting like this," said Counselor Ilara Quinn, her voice trembling. "Our resources are depleted. Our people are dying. If we don't act now, there will be nothing left to save." Admiral Vos nodded slowly. He turned to face the assembled council members, his gaze unwavering. "I propose a bold plan," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We send one ship, one highly advanced vessel, into the heart of Vorthak space. Its mission: destroy their central hive." A stunned silence filled the room. Then came the murmurs. Some called it madness. Others whispered that it might just work. But most agreed on one thing: it sounded like suicide. "Just one ship?" asked General Marcus Hale, leaning forward in his seat. "Against an entire species. You're asking us to gamble everything on a single roll of the dice." Vos didn't flinch. "Not just any ship," he clarified. "The Eclipse Dawn. It's equipped with cloaking technology, quantum weaponry, and AI-driven defenses. More importantly, it has a crew unlike any other. If anyone can pull this off, they can." Counselor Quinn frowned. "And if they fail? Then we've lost no more than we already have," Vos replied bluntly. "But if they succeed?" He paused, letting the implications sink in. "If they succeed, we win the war." Debate raged for hours. Some argued that sending reinforcements would increase their chances of success. Others pointed out that every available ship was needed to defend Earth and its remaining colonies. In the end, desperation won out. With heavy hearts, the council approved the plan. Outside the chamber, reporters waited eagerly for news. When word leaked about the decision, public reaction was mixed. Some hailed the crew of the Eclipse Dawn as heroes willing to sacrifice themselves for humanity's survival. Others saw them as pawns in a reckless gamble, a last-ditch effort by a government desperate to cling to hope. Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse Dawn, preparations were underway. Captain Lyra Solon paced the bridge, her mind racing. She had been chosen to lead this impossible mission, and while she understood the logic behind it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why send just one ship? Was it truly about strategy, or was there another reason? As the countdown to launch began, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. Her crew watched her closely, their faces reflecting a mix of determination and fear. They all knew what was at stake. Failure meant extinction. Success, that remained uncertain. And so, with billions of lives hanging in the balance, the Eclipse Dawn prepared to embark on its perilous journey into the unknown. Across the galaxy, whispers echoed among both humans and Vorthak alike. Why are the humans sending just one ship? Little did anyone know, the answer lay not in strength or numbers, but in courage, ingenuity, and perhaps even a touch of madness. The Eclipse Dawn wasn't your ordinary spaceship. Sleek and angular, it looked more like a weapon than a vessel. Its surface shimmered with adaptive camouflage technology, capable of bending light to render it nearly invisible. Inside, every corner hummed with advanced machinery powered by quantum cores. But the ship's true strength didn't lie in its hardware. It lay in the people who called it home. Captain Lyra Solon stood on the bridge, her arms crossed as she studied her crew. Each member had been handpicked for this mission, not because they were perfect, but because they were unpredictable, unorthodox, dangerous even. Admiral Vos had chosen them carefully, knowing that success would require more than just skill. It would demand creativity, resilience, and maybe a little bit of recklessness. First, there was Zin, a wiry hacker from the Outer Rim colonies. His reputation preceded him. He'd once broken into Earth's central banking system, just to prove it could be done. With cybernetic implants lining his forearms and a smirk that never seemed to fade, Zin was equal parts genius and troublemaker. He sat at one of the consoles now, tapping away furiously, already bypassing security protocols Admiral Vos had installed. "Relax," he said without looking up when Captain Solon shot him a warning glare. "I'm just making sure we don't get locked out if things go sideways." Next to him was Dr. Elias Marrow, a xenobiologist whose obsession with alien life forms bordered on fanatical. Tall and lanky, with glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, Marrow spent most of his time buried in datapads or staring at samples under microscopes. While others saw the Vorthak as monsters, Marrow viewed them as puzzles waiting to be solved. "Understanding our enemy is key to defeating them," he often reminded the crew, though few shared his fascination. Then there was Tessa Ghost Rourke, the pilot. Her nickname came from her uncanny ability to make the impossible look easy. Rumors swirled about how much of her body had been replaced with cybernetics after a near-fatal accident years ago. Whether those rumors were true or not, no one doubted her skills. She leaned casually against the wall near the navigation panel, her sharp green eyes scanning readouts, while she twirled a small wrench between her fingers. "Just tell me where you want to go," she said confidently. "I'll get us there, even if I have to fly through hell itself." Finally, there was Lieutenant Dax Renner, the ship's tactical officer. Broad-shouldered and stoic, Dax rarely spoke unless necessary. A former soldier turned strategist, he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. Though he appeared calm, those who knew him well understood that beneath his composed exterior lay a simmering anger, born from years of watching friends die in battles humanity couldn't afford to lose. As the days passed, tensions aboard the Eclipse Dawn began to rise. The crew worked together efficiently enough, but trust didn't come easily. Zin's constant tinkering made some uneasy, especially when unexplained glitches started cropping up around the ship. Was it sabotage? Or simply bad luck? Meanwhile, Captain Solon kept a close eye on everyone, her instincts telling her something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone among them might not have humanity's best interests at heart. One evening, during a rare moment of downtime, Marrow approached Solon in the mess hall. "You know," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening, "this mission feels off. Why send just one ship? And why us?" Solon sighed, setting down her cup of coffee. "It's a gamble," she admitted, "but sometimes gambles pay off. We just have to believe we're the ones holding all the cards." Marrow frowned, unconvinced. Or maybe we're the decoys. Before Solon could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Everyone rushed to their stations as the Eclipse Dawn shuddered violently. It seemed their journey was about to become far more dangerous and far less predictable than anyone had anticipated. For now, though, the crew pressed forward, united by one undeniable truth. Whatever awaited them, they'd face it together, or not at all. The launch of the Eclipse Dawn was a quiet affair. No fanfare, no cheering crowds. In the dead of night, under the cover of Earth's shadow, the sleek vessel slipped away from its docking bay and into the vast emptiness of space. The decision to keep the departure low-key hadn't been made lightly. It was a calculated move to avoid drawing attention from prying eyes, or worse, spies loyal to the Vorthak. Back on Earth, public opinion remained divided. News outlets buzzed with speculation about the mission. Some hailed the crew as heroes willing to sacrifice everything for humanity's survival. "They're our last hope," one commentator declared during a live broadcast. Others were less optimistic. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read, "One ship won't save us," and "Don't waste lives." Rumors swirled that the mission was nothing more than a desperate distraction, a way to buy time while Earth prepared for evacuation. Aboard the Eclipse Dawn, however, there was little room for doubt or debate. Captain Lyra Solon stood on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back as she watched the stars stretch endlessly before them. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Why had Admiral Vos chosen such a small team? What if something went wrong? And most troubling of all, what if they weren't meant to come back? Tessa Ghost Rourke guided the ship smoothly through the initial jump sequence, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. "First leg complete," she announced, glancing over her shoulder at Solon. "We're clear of Earth's orbit." "Good work," Solon replied, though her tone lacked enthusiasm. She turned to address the rest of the crew. "Listen up. From here on out, we operate under strict radio silence. No unnecessary transmissions. If anyone detects us, we're done before we even begin." Zinn, seated at his console nearby, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He'd already hacked into several of the ship's systems, claiming it was just in case. His actions irritated Lieutenant Dax Renner, who shot him a disapproving glare. "You messing around again?" Dax growled. "We don't need any surprises blowing up in our faces." "Relax, big guy," Zinn retorted without looking up. "I'm just making sure we don't get locked out of our own toys." Dr. Ilias Mero hovered near the rear of the bridge, clutching a datapad filled with notes on the Vorthek. Though he tried to focus, his thoughts kept drifting back to the mission briefing. Something about it didn't add up. Sending just one ship seemed reckless, almost suicidal. Was this truly their best chance, or were they being used as pawns in some larger game? As the hours passed, the crew settled into their routines, but paranoia began to creep in. Systems that should have run flawlessly started acting strangely. Lights flickered intermittently. Temperature readings fluctuated without explanation. Even the AI assistant occasionally stuttered mid-sentence, leaving cryptic fragments hanging in the air. Captain Solon noticed these anomalies too. Standing alone in her quarters later that evening, she reviewed logs and diagnostics, searching for answers. Nothing conclusive appeared, but her instincts screamed that something was off. Could it be sabotage, a malfunction, or perhaps something far more sinister? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Mero, his face pale and drawn. "Captain," he whispered urgently, stepping inside. "I think we have a problem." "What is it?" Solon asked sharply, rising to her feet. Mero hesitated, then held up his datapad. On the screen was a string of code he'd uncovered buried deep within the ship's mainframe. It wasn't part of the original programming, and it definitely wasn't supposed to be there. This looks like a kill switch," he said grimly. "If triggered, it could disable critical systems, maybe even the cloaking device." Solon stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. Whoever planted this code wanted to ensure the Eclipse Dawn wouldn't return. For now, they had no choice but to proceed, but trust among the crew was beginning to fray. Each member carried their own suspicions, their own fears, and as the ship hurtled deeper into hostile territory, one thing became painfully clear: not everyone aboard could be trusted. For the first time since taking command, Captain Solon felt truly alone. The Eclipse Dawn drifted silently through the void, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to the countless Vorthek patrols that roamed nearby star systems. The crew worked in tense silence, each member hyper-aware of the danger surrounding them. Every jump, every course correction brought them closer to enemy territory and closer to potential disaster. Captain Lyra Solon stood on the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors for any sign of trouble. "How's our trajectory?" she asked Tessa Ghost Rourke, who sat at the helm with her usual calm demeanor. Smooth sailing so far, Tessa replied, her fingers gliding over the controls. We're still within safe parameters, but I'm keeping an eye out for anything unusual. Dr. Ilias Mero hovered near one of the science stations, analyzing data from long-range scanners. His brow furrowed as he studied a series of strange energy signatures emanating from a distant moon orbiting a gas giant. "Captain," he said suddenly, turning to face Solon, "I think you should see this." Solon stepped closer, peering at the readings displayed on his screen. "What am I looking at?" "It's odd," Mero admitted. "These energy patterns don't match anything we've seen before. They could be natural phenomena, but—" He hesitated, then added, "or they might indicate some kind of vortex activity." Zin leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Let me guess. Doc wants us to take a detour and check it out." Mero shot him a glare. "If it's important, yes. Understanding the vortex is critical if we're going to succeed. Ignoring something like this could cost us later." Lieutenant Dax Renner crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "We're not here to play scientist. Our mission is clear: destroy the central hive. Anything else is a distraction." Solon considered their arguments carefully. Time was precious, and deviating from their path carried risks. But Mero had a point. The more they knew about their enemy, the better their chances of survival. After a moment, she nodded. "Fine. We'll investigate, but quickly. If things go south, we leave immediately." "Understood." The crew murmured their agreement, though tension lingered in the air. As the eclipsed dawn adjusted course toward the mysterious moon, everyone prepared for the worst. When they arrived, what they found shocked them. Hidden beneath the moon's cratered surface was a sprawling underground facility teeming with vortex activity. Massive drones patrolled the perimeter while smaller swarms scurried between tunnels carved into the rock. But the most horrifying discovery came when Mero zoomed in on the images captured by the ship's sensors. "They're using humans," he whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Look." Solon's stomach churned as she saw the truth. Dozens of human prisoners, chained and emaciated, being herded into containment pods. Some were injected with strange fluids, others connected to pulsating organic machinery. It was clear what the vortex intended: to use these captives as hosts for their larvae, ensuring their species' survival even as they waged war across the galaxy. "This changes everything," Solon said quietly, her fists clenched. "We can't just leave them here." Dax frowned. "Rescuing them wasn't part of the plan. It'll slow us down and put us at greater risk. And doing nothing makes us no better than the monsters we're fighting," Solon snapped. She turned to address the crew. "We're going in. Zin, disable their security systems. Tessa, keep the ship ready for extraction. Mero, you're with me. We'll get those people out." As the team prepared for the dangerous operation, fear and determination mingled in equal measure. They all knew the odds were against them, but leaving innocent lives behind wasn't an option. For the first time since their journey began, the crew felt united, not just by duty, but by purpose. The rescue mission would test their limits, pushing them to the brink of failure. But deep down, each of them understood this was why they'd been chosen. Not because they were expendable, but because they were willing to fight for something greater than themselves. The rescue mission began under the cover of darkness, or as close to it as space allowed. The eclipsed dawn hovered just beyond the moon's horizon, its cloaking device masking its presence from the vortex patrols below. Captain Lyra Solon led a small team onto the surface, their movements swift and silent. Dressed in sleek combat suits equipped with stealth tech, they blended seamlessly into the shadows cast by the jagged craters. Dr. Ilias Mero adjusted the settings on his scanner, his hands trembling slightly despite his best efforts to stay calm. "The containment pods are located deep underground," he whispered, pointing toward a narrow fissure leading into the facility. "We'll need to move quickly before they detect us." Zin crouched nearby, already hacking into the external security systems guarding the entrance. His fingers danced across a portable interface, bypassing firewalls and disabling cameras with practiced ease. "Got it," he muttered after a tense moment. "You've got about 10 minutes before they notice something's wrong." Solon nodded sharply. "Let's move." The team descended into the tunnels, their path illuminated only by dim red emergency lights lining the walls. The air grew colder and heavier with each step, carrying an eerie hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the environment became. Organic tendrils pulsed along the walls, oozing a viscous fluid that smelled faintly metallic. They'd reached the first containment area without incident, but what awaited them inside froze them in their tracks. Dozens of humans hung suspended in translucent pods, their bodies connected to tubes and wires feeding nutrients, or perhaps something far worse, into their veins. Some were unconscious. Others stared blankly ahead, their eyes sunken and hollow. "We don't have time to free everyone," Solon said grimly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Focus on getting as many out as possible." Marrow hesitated, his scientific curiosity warring with the urgency of the situation. "Captain, if we leave these systems intact, the Vorthak could use them again. We need to destroy this place, and risk killing the prisoners still alive." Solon countered sharply. "No, we extract who we can and get out. That's the priority." As the team worked to disconnect the pods, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Zinn cursed under his breath. "They found us sooner than expected." Vorthak drones swarmed into the chamber moments later, their chitinous bodies gleaming menacingly in the low light. Lieutenant Dax Renner stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Go," he barked at Solon. "I'll hold them off." "Negative," Solon snapped. "We stick together. No one gets left behind." But Dax didn't wait for further argument. With a fierce determination etched across his face, he charged at the swarm, firing bursts of plasma energy that tore through the advancing creatures. His actions bought the others precious seconds, though it came at great personal risk. Back aboard the Eclipse Dawn, Tessa Ghost Rourke monitored the chaos unfolding below. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the controls, ready to dive into the fray if needed. When the distress signal finally came through, she didn't hesitate. "Hang on," she muttered, bringing the ship roaring to life. "I'm coming." With Tessa's expert maneuvers providing cover fire, the team managed to evacuate dozens of survivors back to the safety of the vessel. As the last pod was secured, Solon gave the order to retreat, but not before planting explosives throughout the facility. The resulting explosion obliterated the underground complex, leaving nothing but scorched rock and ash in its wake. Though victorious, the cost weighed heavily on everyone. Dax returned injured but alive, his armor scorched and cracked. The rescued prisoners huddled together in silence, too traumatized to speak, and Captain Solon stood alone on the bridge, staring out at the wreckage they'd left behind. Her thoughts turned darker. They had saved lives today, but how many more would die tomorrow? The war was far from over, and every victory came at a price. Still, she reminded herself of one truth. No matter how impossible the odds, humanity would fight. Because giving up wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. The Eclipse Dawn limped through space, its hull scorched and systems strained from the rescue mission. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage while tending to the traumatized survivors they'd brought aboard. Captain Lyra Solon paced the bridge, her mind racing with questions. Why had the Vorthak been using human prisoners as hosts? What did it mean for their understanding of the enemy? And for humanity's chances of survival? Dr. Ilias Marrow was determined to find answers. He set up a makeshift lab in one of the cargo bays, examining the rescued humans with a mix of clinical precision and quiet compassion. Many were too weak to speak, but those who could offered fragmented accounts of their captivity. They injected us with something," one survivor rasped, his voice trembling. "It felt like they were inside my head." Marrow frowned, studying blood samples under a microscope. The fluid used by the Vorthak wasn't just nutrient-rich. It contained microscopic organisms that seemed to integrate with human biology at a cellular level. "This isn't just about reproduction," he murmured to himself. "It's control. They're trying to assimilate us into their hive mind." His discovery sent shockwaves through the crew. If the Vorthak could hijack human consciousness, then no one was truly safe, not even those who escaped. Zin, ever the skeptic, leaned against the doorway of the lab, arms crossed. "So what you're saying is, these bugs don't just want to kill us. They want to turn us into them." "Essentially, yes," Marrow replied grimly. "And if they succeed, humanity won't just be wiped out. We'll become part of their collective, a tool for their expansion." Solon listened intently as Marrow presented his findings during a tense meeting on the bridge. "This changes everything," she said finally, her voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "If we destroy the central hive, we might not only cripple their military, we could sever the psychic link binding the entire species." Lieutenant Dax Renner frowned, rubbing his injured shoulder absently. "Assuming we can even reach it. That asteroid field guarding the hive isn't exactly an open door." Tessa Ghost Rourke chimed in, spinning her wrench idly. "Yeah, but dodging debris is kind of my thing. I'll get us there. Just tell me when." Despite their bravado, everyone knew the next phase of the mission would be the most dangerous yet. The asteroid field surrounding the central hive was notorious for its chaotic gravitational pulls and swarms of automated drones programmed to obliterate intruders. Even the Eclipse Dawn's advanced cloaking technology wouldn't guarantee safety. As they approached the edge of the field, Marrow continued his research, piecing together fragments of data recovered from the destroyed facility. What he uncovered chilled him to the bone. The central hive wasn't just a command center, it was alive. A massive, pulsating organism connected to every Vorthak drone, soldier, and queen via psychic tendrils that stretched across light years. Destroying it wouldn't simply disrupt their chain of command. It would sever the very lifeline keeping the species unified. "This thing, this hive," Marrow explained to Solon late one night, his voice hushed with awe and dread. "It's not just controlling them, it is them. Without it, the Vorthak would lose cohesion. They'd devolve into chaos, maybe even extinction." Solon stared at the holographic model of the hive projected before them, her expression unreadable. "Then we have no choice. We take it out." But as the Eclipse Dawn entered the asteroid field, reality hit hard. Massive rocks tumbled chaotically, colliding and breaking apart in unpredictable patterns. Tessa maneuvered the ship with breathtaking skill, weaving between jagged boulders while evading bursts of plasma fire from hidden drones. Each near miss left the crew breathless, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. "We're almost through," Tessa shouted over the comm, sweat beading on her forehead. "Just a little farther." Zin monitored the ship's systems, muttering curses as alarms blared. "Shields are dropping fast. One wrong move, and we're space dust." For all their preparation, nothing could fully prepare them for what lay ahead. Beyond the asteroid field loomed the central hive, a grotesque, pulsating mass of organic machinery larger than any structure humanity had ever encountered. Its surface writhed with activity, glowing veins of energy coursing beneath translucent membranes. As the crew prepared for their final assault, a sense of inevitability settled over them. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Success meant salvation. Failure meant annihilation. And somewhere deep within the hive, the Vorthak waited, unaware that their greatest threat came not in numbers, but in courage. Captain Solon clenched her fists, steeling herself for what was to come. "Let's finish this," she said firmly. The Eclipse Dawn hovered just beyond the shadow of the asteroid field, its cloaking device masking its presence as Tessa Ghost Rourke expertly guided it into position. The crew had finally reached their destination, the central hive. But instead of celebration, an uneasy tension filled the air. The journey through the asteroid field had been harrowing, and the sight of the massive, pulsating hive looming ahead only deepened their unease. Zin sat hunched over his console, his fingers flying across the keys as he sifted through encrypted files buried deep within the ship's database. He'd been poking around since the mission began, driven by a gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. His instincts proved correct when he stumbled upon a classified document marked Eyes Only. Admiral Vos. What he read turned his blood cold. "Captain," Zin called out sharply, his voice cutting through the tense silence on the bridge. When Solon approached, he pulled up the file on a nearby monitor. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. It was clear now. Admiral Vos had never intended for them to return alive. The mission wasn't about victory. It was about buying time. Humanity's leaders had already begun evacuating key populations, leaving the Eclipse Dawn as a sacrificial pawn. "You've got to be kidding me," Dax growled, stepping closer to see the screen. His fists clenched at his sides. "They sent us here knowing we wouldn't make it back." Solon's jaw tightened as she processed the betrayal. She turned to face the crew, her expression unreadable but her voice steady. "This doesn't change our objective. We destroy the hive, and we do everything in our power to survive." But not everyone shared her resolve. Zin stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Survive? Are you serious? They set us up to die. And for what? So Earth can run away while we throw our lives away." Marrow interjected, his tone calm but firm. "We knew this mission was dangerous from the start. But if we abandon it now, billions will die, including those prisoners we saved. Is that what you want?" "It's not about what I want," Zin snapped, his voice rising. "It's about being used like expendable trash. Why should we trust anything they told us?" Tessa stepped forward, her usual cool demeanor replaced with quiet intensity. "Because whether or not they care about us, we still have a job to do. If we don't take out that hive, none of this matters. Not Earth, not the survivors, nothing." The argument escalated, tempers flaring as accusations flew. For a moment, it seemed the crew might fracture entirely. But then Solon raised her hand, silencing them all. "Enough," she said firmly. Her piercing gaze swept over each member of the team. "I won't lie to you. We're running out of options. But I'll tell you this. Humanity's survival depends on us finishing what we started. Not because Admiral Vos ordered it, but because it's the right thing to do." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Slowly, reluctantly, the crew nodded. Betrayed though they were, they couldn't deny the truth of her statement. Their mission wasn't just about revenge or duty anymore. It was about hope. Hope that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above despair and fight for a better future. With renewed determination, the crew devised a plan to breach the hive's defenses. Using decoy drones and precise maneuvers, they would create a diversion while a small strike team infiltrated the core. It was risky, but it was their best chance. As preparations began, Zin lingered behind, his earlier anger giving way to guilt. He approached Solon quietly. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I shouldn't have lost it like that." Solon placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening slightly. "We're all carrying burdens, Zin. Just focus on getting us through this. Together." For the first time in days, the crew felt united, not by blind loyalty, but by a shared purpose. They weren't fighting for Earth's leaders. They were fighting for themselves, for the innocent lives depending on them, and for the faint glimmer of hope that humanity could endure. And so, with hearts heavy but resolute, the crew of the Eclipse Dawn prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. Beyond the hive's glowing surface awaited untold horrors, but also the possibility of redemption. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. They would go down fighting. The Eclipse Dawn unleashed its decoy drones, sending them spiraling toward the central hive in a dazzling display of light and motion. The Vorthec defenses roared to life, their automated turrets and swarming drones converging on the false targets with relentless precision. For a fleeting moment, the chaos provided the perfect cover for Captain Lyra Solon and her strike team to slip through the hive's outer defenses. Clad in stealth-enhanced combat suits, the small group moved cautiously across the pulsating surface of the hive. Every step felt like walking on living flesh. The ground quivered beneath their boots, and faint vibrations echoed through the air, as if the structure itself was alive. Massive organic tendrils writhed overhead, glowing veins of energy coursing just beneath translucent membranes. The sight was both mesmerizing and horrifying. "This place feels wrong," Zin muttered under his breath, his usual bravado replaced by unease. He adjusted the scanner strapped to his wrist, attempting to map out a safe route through the labyrinthine corridors ahead. "It's like the whole thing is watching us." Dr. Elias Marrow nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the alien architecture with a mix of fascination and dread. "It probably is. Remember what I said about the hive mind. It's not just controlling the Vorthek. It is them. This entire structure could be aware of our presence." Lieutenant Dax Renner brought up the rear, his weapon at the ready. "Then let's hope it doesn't wake up until after we plant the charges." Solon led the way, her movements deliberate and silent. She signaled for the team to halt as they approached a massive entranceway guarded by towering insectoid sentinels. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the dim red light, mandibles clicking ominously as they scanned the area. Tessa Ghost Rourke had stayed behind to monitor the ship, but she remained in constant communication, feeding updates from her sensors. "You've got about 30 seconds before those guards rotate positions," she warned over the comms. "Make it quick." Zin worked his magic, hacking into the hive's internal systems to temporarily disable the Sentinel's sensory arrays. As the creatures froze mid-motion, the team darted past them, slipping into the shadowy depths of the hive. What awaited them inside defied comprehension. Chambers filled with grotesque machinery stretched endlessly in every direction. Pulsating pods lined the walls, each containing writhing forms that seemed neither fully human nor fully Vorthek. Tubes pumped viscous fluids into the captives, while psychic tendrils snaked into their skulls, fusing them to the hive's consciousness. The air reeked of decay and something metallic, making it hard to breathe. Marrow stopped abruptly, staring at one of the pods in horror. Inside was a young woman, her face pale, her eyes wide open but unseeing. Her lips moved soundlessly, as though trying to speak. "They're still alive," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Or some part of them is." Solon placed a hand on his shoulder, forcing him to keep moving. "Focus, Doc. We can't save everyone. Not now." As they ventured deeper, the hive seemed to grow more hostile. Organic barriers shifted unpredictably, forcing the team to backtrack and find alternate routes. Strange whispers echoed through the corridors, low and guttural, as if the hive itself was speaking to them. Zin swore he heard his name among the murmurs, causing him to whirl around, searching for the source. "It's messing with your head," Dax growled, gripping his weapon tighter. "Don't listen to it." Finally, they reached the core, a cavernous chamber dominated by a colossal, pulsating mass of organic tissue. Thick veins of energy radiated outward, connecting the hive to countless nodes scattered throughout the structure. It was the heart of the Vorthek species, and their only chance at ending the war. Solon set down the explosives carefully, ensuring they were positioned to maximize damage. But as she worked, a chilling realization dawned on her. Destroying this place wouldn't just cripple the Vorthek, it would annihilate an entire ecosystem, wiping out billions of lives connected to the hive. Was this truly justice, or was it genocide? Before she could dwell on the question, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The hive had detected them. Sentinels poured into the room, their claws clicking menacingly. "Time's up," Zin shouted, scrambling to finish arming the charges. "We need to go, now." But escaping wouldn't be easy. The hive wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. The chamber erupted into chaos as Vorthek sentinels surged forward, their chitinous bodies gleaming under the pulsating glow of the hive's core. Captain Lyra Solon barked orders, her voice cutting through the cacophony. Zin, Finish arming the charges. Dax, cover us. Marrow, stay close. We're not losing anyone else. Dax Renner stepped forward without hesitation, his weapon roaring to life as plasma bolts tore through the advancing swarm. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated, but even his skill couldn't hold back the tide for long. The Sentinels were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Sparks flew as claws scraped against the team's armor, forcing them to retreat closer to the core. Zin worked frantically at the base of the massive organic structure, his hands trembling as he keyed in the final sequence to activate the explosives. Almost done, he shouted, sweat dripping down his face. Behind him, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the hive itself was pleading for mercy. He shook his head violently, trying to block out the noise. Shut up. Just shut up. Marrow stood nearby, clutching a scanner and watching the readouts with growing dread. Captain, he called urgently, the hive's defenses are adapting. It's rerouting energy to reinforce its barriers. If we don't detonate soon, it might neutralize the charges. Solon clenched her jaw, her mind racing. They were running out of time and options. She turned to Dax, who was now backed against the core, firing wildly to keep the Sentinels at bay. How much longer can you hold them? Not long, Dax replied grimly, his voice strained. A claw grazed his arm, tearing through his suit and drawing blood. He grunted in pain but didn't falter. You need to go. Now. No one gets left behind. Solon snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. But deep down, she knew the truth. Someone would have to stay behind to ensure the mission succeeded. Finally, Zin let out a triumphant yell. Charges armed. Detonation in 60 seconds. Then let's move, Solon ordered, grabbing Marrow by the arm and pulling him toward the exit. But as they turned to leave, a deafening screech filled the chamber. The Sentinels paused momentarily, their heads tilting in unison as if receiving a new directive. Then, with terrifying speed, they converged on the team. Not to attack, but to protect the core. They're trying to shield it, Marrow exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. If they succeed, the explosion won't be enough to destroy it. Solon's eyes darted around the chamber, assessing the situation. There was only one way to guarantee success, but it meant sacrificing herself. She made her decision in an instant. Go, she commanded, shoving Marrow toward Zin and Dax. I'll hold them off. What? No, Zin protested, his voice cracking. We're not leaving you here. You don't have a choice, Solon shot back, her expression fierce. She grabbed a grenade from her belt and activated it, holding it tightly in her hand. Get out of here. That's an order. Before anyone could argue further, she charged at the Sentinels, drawing their attention away from the core. Her movements were swift and fearless, every step fueled by determination. As the creatures closed in around her, she hurled the grenade into their midst, creating a blinding explosion that sent shards of exoskeleton flying in all directions. Captain, Dax roared, starting to run back toward her, but Zin and Marrow pulled him back. We can't lose you two, Zin shouted, tears streaming down his face. She gave us a chance. Don't waste it. Reluctantly, Dax allowed himself to be dragged away, his fists clenched so tightly they trembled. The three remaining crew members sprinted through the twisting corridors of the hive, the countdown echoing in their ears. Behind them, the ground quaked as the explosives detonated, sending shockwaves rippling through the structure. They'd barely made it outside before the hive imploded in a cataclysmic burst of light and energy. The Eclipse Dawn hovered nearby, its engines roaring to life as Tessa guided it toward them. As they boarded, none of them spoke. Their hearts were heavy with loss, but also with resolve. Back aboard the ship, they gathered on the bridge, staring silently at the wreckage of the central hive. Somewhere deep within the void, the faintest glimmer of hope remained. Humanity had struck a devastating blow, but the cost had been immense. And though Captain Solon was gone, her final words echoed in their minds. Tell Earth we held the line. The eclipsed dawn limped through the void, its battered hull bearing the scars of a mission that had pushed humanity to the brink. And beyond, the surviving crew sat in silence on the bridge, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. Captain Lyra Solin's sacrifice weighed heavily on them all, her final act of bravery ensuring the destruction of the Vortex Central Hive. But as they stared out at the wreckage fading into the distance, none of them felt like victors. Dr. Elias Merrow broke the silence first, his voice soft but strained. "It's over," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "We did it." But Zin wasn't so sure. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his usual smirk replaced by a haunted expression. "Did we? Destroying that thing doesn't mean the Vorthak are gone. Just disconnected. What happens when they regroup?" Lieutenant Dax Renner frowned, rubbing his injured arm absently. "For now, they're scattered. Without the hive mind binding them together, they're just animals acting on instinct. It buys us time. Time to rebuild, to prepare for whatever comes next." Tessa Ghost Rourke, seated at the helm, glanced over her shoulder. Her green eyes were unusually solemn. "And what about Earth? Do you think they'll even care what we've done? After everything Admiral Voles put us through?" Her words hung in the air, unspoken accusations lingering between them. They all knew the truth. Humanity's leaders had used them as pawns, sending them on a suicide mission without any intention of honoring their sacrifice. Yet here they were, alive against all odds, carrying the weight of billions on their shoulders. Merrow sighed, setting down his datapad. "We can't change what they did, or didn't do. All we can do is decide how we move forward. If we let bitterness consume us, then we've lost more than just the captain." Dax nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "She gave us a chance. Now it's up to us to make sure her sacrifice wasn't wasted." As the eclipse dawn approached Earth's orbit days later, news of their success spread quickly. Despite the Council's initial betrayal, the crew was hailed as heroes. Crowds gathered outside spaceports, cheering wildly as the ship touched down. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and banners reading "Heroes of Humanity" fluttered in the wind. But beneath the celebrations lay uneasy questions. Was this truly victory, or merely a temporary reprieve? Inside the ship, the crew prepared to disembark, each member grappling with their own emotions. Zin adjusted his gloves nervously, muttering under his breath, "I never signed up for parades." "You don't have to stay for them," Tessa said quietly, offering him a rare smile. "None of us do. We've earned the right to walk away if we want." But instead of leaving, they stood together as the hatch opened, facing the world they'd fought so hard to save. As they stepped onto the platform, the roar of the crowd washed over them. But none of them smiled. Their eyes carried the burden of what they'd seen, what they'd lost. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to rebuild. Refugees returned to colonies once thought lost, and scientists worked tirelessly to understand the fragments of the Vortex species still drifting in deep space. But amidst the hope, whispers of caution remained. Would understanding lead to coexistence or another war? For the crew of the Eclipse Dawn, life moved on in quiet ways. Merrow dedicated himself to studying the rescued prisoners, searching for clues about the Vortex biology. Zin disappeared into the shadows of the Outer Rim, leaving behind only rumors of his exploits. Dax took command of a new fleet, training soldiers to defend against future threats. And Tessa, she stayed behind the controls of the Eclipse Dawn, refusing to let the ship be decommissioned. Somewhere in the vastness of space, remnants of the Vorthak lingered, waiting. Humanity had won the battle, but the galaxy was far from peaceful. Still, as long as people like the crew of the Eclipse Dawn existed, there would always be those willing to fight for a brighter tomorrow. And perhaps that was enough.